Sarona Farrell, how are you doing today?
Hey, Snowy, how are you? Glad to see you. Can I call you Snowy?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You were known to your high school friends back in Punahou, in the graduating class of 1988 as
Oh,
Sarona Sowa. You are currently in Philadelphia, is that correct,
I
Sarona?
sure am. Philly.
You're best known for being an accomplished and celebrated singer, but you are also a professional wedding planner.
I
Uh,
am now, yeah.
and people are still getting married. That's still a good job.
They still are getting married.
I remember you very well. I certainly remember some of the singing performances that you gave at Punahou, but I also just remember that your wonderful personality and just your friendly disposition. And it seems like you've retained those qualities. So that's great. Why don't we start with your family history?
Yeah.
And then we'll sort of get into what your childhood was like, and we'll go all the way up until graduation 1988. Tell me about the Soa family.
So my dad, Joseph Sowa, is from Baltimore, born in 1927, and he first made his way to Hawaii in the Navy. He couldn't wait to get out of Baltimore. And so when he was 17 and he was given the go ahead, he went all the way across the country to San Diego. He lived there for a bit, went to San Diego State University. He had only had an eighth grade education. So when he wanted to go to college on the GI Bill, they realized he hadn't finished high school. So he had to do his high school first there at the college. He did night school there, and then he got a degree at San Diego State. And he was really good with numbers, and so he kind of went into accounting. That was his field. And he had some friends there that were teachers and eventually made their way to Hawaii and called him to come to Hawaii and teach. And so he taught at Kamehameha Schools from the 1956 is when he started there. And he was among many kind of haole teachers from the mainland that were recruited to teach at Kamehameha Schools. And he started the school for boys. He began the business program there. And he had like over a 30-year career at Kamehameha. He loved Kamehameha. And we were a Kamehameha family. So my mom, Ivalani Carpenter, she comes from another kind of Hapa family from the islands. My uncle is Dante Carpenter, so he's been in politics and whatnot. So Vernon Carpenter, her dad, came from Central Texas, Killeen, Texas. He moved to Hawaii, married a local girl, Louise Kakelaka. That was my mother's mother. I have a long line of real Hawaiian people in my family. My mother's great grandmother, who was from Puna, she was a papapa. Her name was Keaweheana Papapa. This family photo that we have of this Chinese man, he was a cook on a ship going between China and Hawaii. He's from Canton, and his name was He Suk Fook. So, man, do I have some Chinese in my family and some longtime Hawaiian. And my mom was a student at Kamehameha when my dad began as a teacher. So, from what she tells me, they didn't start actually dating until she graduated in 1957. But 2 years later, they were married, and my brother was born in 1960. So I'm the youngest of four, the baby of the family, definitely the spoiled one of the family, the most talented one of the family. Just kidding.
What kind of a name is Soa?
So as Polish, my dad's parents were born in Baltimore, but prior to that, the family had come from Poland, from Krakow, Poland. But one of my nephews did a 23andMe and found out that there's some Ashkenazi Jew in there. So I'm not sure where that came from. But no, my dad was Catholic. You know, his mother was Mary and his father was Joseph. I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to my dad, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. I don't really pay attention to anyone because everyone paid attention to me. So my mother's um, maiden name is Carpenter.
Right.
So her father, Vernon Carpenter from Central Texas, married a Hawaiian girl, Kakelaka, and they raised their family in Damon Track, which is like by the airport.
When you were growing up, how connected did you feel to the Hawaiian side of your family? What things did you do? What did people talk about at home?
Interesting. We had a big family. So my uncles, my aunties, there was many of us. I was the one of 26 first cousins. So we had a large family and most of us lived in Hawaii, at least when I was younger. And we just did everything together. I remember lots of time spent at my grandparents' house. Funny enough, when I think about my grandfather and my grandmother, he's haole, she's local. My dad's haole, my mom's, hapa. Um, the men just fell into these families, and I think it might have been maybe something that they were missing from their own families. We know how Hawaiian families are just so loving, so welcoming. Once you're part of us, you're in. And so my dad, he became this extended part of our ohana. And I think it took him a while because, he's this East Coast strict teacher type of guy. And my mom had these three older brothers that were, kolohe. I think it took him some time to get used to the Hawaiian way of things and kind of the teasing nature. Yeah, I did take hula when I was a kid. It didn't stick for me. My mom was a wonderful hula dancer. She danced for all the boats that came in, all the sailors that would come in the 40s, I guess, in the 40s or early 50s. She would dance for, if Elvis was in town or John Wayne was in town, she would be among the dancers. So my mom had that bit of Hawaiiana. I went to Kamehameha, and obviously Hawaiian culture was taught there, and we were very proud of that.
Talk a little bit more about your mom dancing for the ships that came in. I mean, that's like just a classic aspect of Hawaiian history that
Yeah,
unfortunately was lost to a large degree by the arrival of airplanes. I mean, people still get lays when they come off an airplane from time to time. But how did it work with the hula dancers? Like, what would happen? You'd be on a ship, you'd enter, you know, Honolulu Harbor, and then what would happen?
it was a famous hula instructor. He would have, these ladies and young girls, I mean, really girls, and they would have their different costumes on, and they would, when the men would come into port, they would be there, just these beautiful girls in welcoming these haole guys to the island. I can't think of a better way to welcome somebody to the islands, actually.
That's definitely a good marketing for Hawaii. I mean, those guys never forgot arriving in Hawaii.
No, for sure not. And my mom was a Christian girl and she was a goody goody for sure. My mom was. She would teach the younger girls how to dance hula, but hula was seen as this sensual thing and they weren't allowed to be sensual with their body. So she would teach the younger girls to dance hula sitting on her knees. And so she said they could rise up and they could come back down, but they couldn't move their hips at all because that would be considered too sensual. It was from Kamehameha. They required that the girls couldn't move their hips. The missionary school, the haole kid school, really the way that Punahou teaches about Hawaiiana is so respectful and so life-giving and joyful. The young people that I went to church with and the families, we knew each other well. We would go on, we would have church camp several times a year. And our church was like, you didn't miss church. There wasn't an option to miss church on a Sunday. You would go to church Sunday morning. You'd gather with all of the church members on Sunday evening. It was a big part of life. And how did it affect my worldview? Kind of messed me up in a lot of ways. If I'm honest, sometimes I say to my husband, it's amazing that in some of the interactions that I saw in our church um, and some of the teaching from our church, the fact that I remain a believer and that I love God and I know God loves me is a small miracle.
What did you see in your church that might have soured you on religion?
Um, Well, again, legalism, girls couldn't dance, girls couldn't wear pants. Um, I did see in one instance, well, two instances, girls that had gotten pregnant that were teenagers that were made to go in front of the church and apologize to everybody. And there were tears and it was just pretty traumatizing as a young person to watch that. It wasn't a church of grace and mercy. It was kind of a church of hellfire, damnation, and fear-based. Yeah. So that's kind of messed me up a little bit.
You'll get over it. Let's talk about something happier, music.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, you obviously are a very advanced musician. Where did it start?
It started on the piano bench of our home, when I would just sing and they would put me up on the bench and I would sing and sing and sing. And then at the end, they would clap and say, take a bow. And I would take a bow. So yeah, I got used to that attention from early on. I was with the Hawaii Children's Chorus. I sang with them for many years and then eventually moved to the Hawaii Youth Chorus. Just did a lot of singing as a young person.
Was the Hawaiian side of your family musical? Was your father musical? Where did it come from?
From both, in fact. So my father, when he was a young guy, would go to the Peabody Institute in Baltimore, and he would take music lessons. And he had a beautiful resonant voice, my father did. And so I would hear him sing kind of only at church, when I was growing up. But my mother was a pianist. She was our church pianist. She's still the church pianist. She's 85 years old, and still playing piano at the church, at the same church that I grew up in. And then my uncles played guitar, and ukulele. And of course, anytime we would get together, there would be music. We would do different shows at the Honolulu Zoo with Danny Kalekini, who, side note, my mom dated Danny Kalekini for a while in high school. We did a show. I don't really know what came of it, but it was called The Friendship. And I was among a bunch of kids that were on this show. And it was just fun. We would just, we were on some kind of big giant ship and we were doing some singing and acting. And anyway, yeah, that was my big claim to fame, the friendship. I don't know.
How old were you at this time?
I was probably 10 or 11, 12.
So this is 1980, 81.
Yeah.
So you were on TV.
I was on TV, yeah, a little bit. And
I mean,
then
that was a big deal back then. I mean, now people,
oh, sure.
you and I are on YouTube, whatever. But like back then, if you got like if you were on like the evening news for like 3 seconds, it was like, oh my God, I'm on TV. So what was it like for you being regularly on TV, even if it was a relatively small role?
Oh, it was fun, and I wanted to do more,
When did you arrive at Punahou?
So I got to Punahou in seventh grade, and I had come from Kamehameha, and we were this long-standing Kamehameha family. Here I was at Punahou, and I still had that like Kamehameha warriors pride in me. So I was so insecure in many, many ways. Probably my biggest insecurity was my weight and feeling like I wasn't good enough because I was heavier than everybody. And in particular, of course, we get to high school, I'm looking at all of these beautiful girls that I'm in school with. So something happened in eighth grade that was really special for me, that it was during, I was singing in eighth grade choir. Well, let me go back. So seventh grade, I started playing in the band and I was a drummer and I loved it. And probably about halfway through seventh grade, Mr. Heidel came to me and said, what the heck are you doing playing in the band? You need to be singing in the choir. And I really wanted to play the drums, and I loved it. And then Mr. Heidel, put the kibosh on that, and I joined choir in eighth grade. And there was one particular chapel performance where it was towards the end of the year, and Mr. Heidel came to me and said, next year, I'd like you to sing in the chorale. And that was just a moment. I remember crying. I remember people around me just, incredulous, and, these very big moments for an eighth grader, that all of a sudden I was going to be with the big kids in chorale, because that just didn't happen, to have ninth graders in chorale.
Well, your singing skills are even more impressive now that you've revealed that you are essentially a singer trapped in a drummer's body, right?
Yes.
Dr. Heidel was the chaplain, right? That was Dr. Heidel.
Yes.
Mr. Heidel was the music director.
Sure.
They were brothers. What do you think he saw in you?
He heard definitely a voice that was more mature than seventh grade, you know. I blend well, I think, and I just had a bigger voice than, you know, your average 12-year-old. And in fact, Miss Cross said to me when I auditioned, she's like, typically I'm not taking students this young, you know, seventh grade to try to teach like actual bel canto style of classical singing. She said, but, you know, I'm going to take you because I guess she saw something else in me too.
Were you performing to the expectations of adults, or when you were learning these classical musical numbers, did you genuinely connect with them and you genuinely were passionate about singing them?
I wasn't always passionate about singing them. And I'll tell you what, I was just naturally gifted. And so I didn't really develop um, a discipline for practice. And of course, as I sang, I got more attention and I got more visibility, you know, and so that was nice for me, right? Because I wanted that attention. Singing brought me visibility and made kind of set me apart as something a little bit special that not everybody had. And I liked that.
So talk about the upside as well as, if there was one, the downside of having that confidence and you know, responding so well to attention.
The upside is just it's winsome to people, you know, having confidence, having talent, you know, singing and being, you know, being out there, you know, not everybody does that. So it's different, right? And I liked being different in that way. I liked having something that I was known for, right? But then it's all bullshit because you're not confident in seventh grade. You're not confident in ninth grade. So you're kind of faking it till you make it. But but there was this pressure of there was a pressure to perform well. And I don't know if that was just put on by myself or maybe from my mom. Um, I think there was a little bit of stage mothering in my mom. I think she was proud of me and she really wanted to see me use these gifts. She used to say, you know, if you don't use those gifts, you're going to lose it, you know? And so I had it in my mind that I have to sing because this is the gift that I've been given, you know? I got cast as Lori in Oklahoma at the community theater. It was called Honolulu Community Theater then, it's now called Diamond Head Theater. So that was a big moment for me to be a lead in a show. Of course, I got interviewed by Wayne Harada and I got in the paper. Somehow I made it onto Hawaii Superkids. Do you remember that show? I mean, it was a show about kids that did extraordinary things in Hawaii. It was a local show. And they followed me, you know, to rehearsal. They followed me to my voice lesson. They, you know,
And by they, you mean there's a camera crew
yeah, yeah,
on.
yeah. It was on TV.
And,
It's called Hawaii
and
Superkids.
let's again remind the kids of today that again, having a camera crew follow you around in the 80s was a big deal.
To have that kind of spotlight. Um, I had fun. I just loved it. Another big musical moment for me at Punahou was participating at Holoku pageant. That was that was really something else, and I learned so much Hawaiian music there. Dave Eldridge was, you know, a real mentor of mine, and loved him so much. One person, Kavika Fairbanks, our classmate that passed away shortly after high school. I remember him being, you know, a popular kid, and I wasn't a popular kid, but I remember him being kind to me. And there were some kids that weren't kind that were in the popular crowd. Um, and I remember just his smile. He just had such an easy smile and just friendly guy. And when I met my husband, Tim, when he was a teenager, he looked very much like Kavika, towhead blonde, blue eyes, smile, kind. And I said, if I ever had a son, I would name him Kavika. And my son Jack is Kavika, Jack Kavika, um, for our classmate.
What do you remember about the way that people sort of formed groups and friendships, and where do you think you fit in? You know, give us an anthropological analysis of your memory of the social scene at Punahou High School?
I remember that if you're good at something, then you hang with those people that are good at that. So I remember the kids that went to Camp Honolulu. I remember the kids that were um, athletic, right? There were the theater kids, which I was a part of that too. There was the chorale kids. There were the nerds. There were all these, I think there was a place for everyone. And the way I saw myself, I kind of saw myself among the nerds, the music, kind of the music geeks. But also I felt very comfortable in that chorale group, among my chorale friends, many of whom are still my friends today. I had some hangups and insecurities around certain boys or, you know, um,
Did you drink at all? Did you dabble in any substances that many teenagers do?
I definitely had a few Bartles and James. Um, I never smoked pot. Never. Can you believe it? Never did drugs. I wonder if I was just too goody-goody or just not popular enough or whatever. But yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't. And again, that goes back to fear. And also, I also wanted to be a cheerleader. But my voice teacher said, no, you can't be a cheerleader because you ruin your voice. So that was one of the things that I couldn't do because I was a singer, was be a cheerleader. But no, I was scared. I was too scared to smoke because then, I could ruin my voice. So so silly.
You had to protect your precious asset at all costs.
Sure did. My goodness. It served me well. We're there. I remember not being invited to any parties. I remember that I wished that I kind of would have been, but I don't remember that as part of my life. There was one party though. It was a chorale party. It was at Mary Nicholson's house. And I do believe there is some video still out there, maybe by Toby's son Luis has that packed away somewhere that I hope never, never surfaces.
To what extent were you aware of, I guess, ethnic differences and ethnic demarcations in high school?
Like our friends were all our friends, no matter if they were Japanese or haole or, Hawaiians. Yeah, I don't recall there being differentiation. And I'll go back to Holoku, and I recently went to Holoku maybe a couple years ago, and I felt it was such a joyful exploration of Hawaiiana at Punahou. Um, I loved how all these kids, they're Japanese, they're, haole kids, they're whatever. They're all participating in the chanting, in the dances, in learning Hawaiiana. And I thought that was just really, really beautiful. And I'm so glad that Punahou continues that and does it in such a way that's joyful. I appreciate that.
Let's fast forward to, I guess it was June 1988. We were all getting ready to graduate. What was your frame of mind? How did you feel? You were an adult, technically. What kind of an adult did you feel like you were going to be?
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. I was ready to go. I had rock fever. I was going to be a star. I was going to USC to pursue singing. And I was just on the next flight to stardom, right? And so I was ready to go. I was excited to start to embark on that music career at USC. And we'll harken back to what I said about not having developed discipline, where I was the big fish in the small pond, where I won all the awards and everything in the Hawaii vocal, stratosphere. When I went to USC as a 18-year-old, I was just another singer. And there were lots of people that were better than me, and there were lots of people that had a better discipline for practice than I did. And yeah, I think I paid for that a little bit. Where solo vocal singing and choral singing was, one and the same at Punahou. When you get to college, you've got these two factions working against them. The vocal arts teachers don't want their students singing in choir because it'll wreck them. and yet the choir wants all these great singers, right? But I already had this love of choral singing, and so I don't know, my teacher be damned. I went and sang in the choir and I loved it. And I had a great experience in college because of it, and beyond college, just kept singing and kept singing. And yeah, I just, my life has been so blessed by the incredible singing and the incredible conductors and colleagues and places I visited because of singing. And I'm just so thankful for that.
It's kind of like your ticket to the world, huh?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, what have I neglected to ask you? Were there any triumphs or challenges from age 0 to 18 that have formed you or were quite influential for you that we've neglected to discuss?
0 to 18, I think we covered it. 0 to 19, I got pregnant with my oldest daughter in college. And I would say that that experience, when I look back on it, kind of saved me from myself. Because, well, you remember I was the youngest and I was the spoiled one, and I was the one that had, this natural talent at a young age. And I was the one that was always on stage and happy with that and wanting to pursue that. And when I got pregnant, those things changed, you know, that priority changed. I still went on to get my master's degree in music, and I still went on to have a career, but it was a different kind of career than I had expected. Um, it was a career that allowed me to have a family and to, um, I don't know, just I think I was on a path to a really self-centered type of life, and having a child as a child um, just kind of turned that corner for me and kind of saved me from my selfish, stupid self.
Why do you say that you were selfish? I mean, was it something that other people would have noticed, or was it internalized?
I think I say selfish because I was so self-focused. I was so focused on, how I am going to be special and how I am going to achieve the next thing or get the next solo or win the next role. There was that drive in me to have that. And um, had my career taken a different path, I think with the personality that I have, the adaptability, the openness to new things and new people, I would have had a lovely life. Um, but that having a child at that point, and remember when I was at church and I was watching those teenage girls go through that trauma, I had a little mini trauma of myself, for myself when I found out I was pregnant. Um, but I could raise my kids and then, drive 20 minutes to downtown and have a really fulfilling musical life. So I think that the life that it allowed me, which was still full of music and um, travel and, like you say, just an invitation to see the world, in a different way.